Now let's take a look at fill. In drafting, we use fill to indicate material selection. So first up, let's take a look at our property line. I'm going to select that rectangle, and then here in the Attributes palette, I'm going to click on this menu for fill, and I'm going to change it from none to solid, and that's just going to give me a solid color, in this case white. If I want to change colors, I just click on the color selector right there, and then it opens up this dialog box for me. So here you can see that we have a colors tab, and that the color palette that it's currently showing is all the colors that are in the active document. So we've got black, gray, white, and then a couple of greens that I've been playing around with. If I click on this menu, there are a couple of other palettes that we can see here. One is the classic Vectorworks color, and the other is the standards Vectorworks color. Now, if I pick a color in here, and I think that I'd like to see the grass as a light color, if I click on that color, it's because I had this rectangle highlighted before I went into the color selector, it's going to give me that color. Now, to me, this color is a little too bright and vibrant, so I would like to change that. I'm going to come back over here, click on the color selector, and it's going to bring me back to this menu. Now, to me, my personal preference is the Vectorworks standard colors, as well as the classic Vectorworks colors. They're a little on the bold side, so if you click on that menu again and then come down here to other palettes, these are other color palettes that come with the Vectorworks software, and you might find something better. So for me, I know that the Pharaoh and Ball colors are really nice to work with, so I'm going to click on that, and then in here I can find another green to see if I like that. So this one, we're moving in the right direction. This one looks better to me, but it's a little brighter than I might like, so I'm going to click on that again. And then remember, I have to click back on this drop-down menu, go to the other palettes, and then go back to the Pharaoh and Ball color palette. So I'm going to try this lighter one because this green that's currently, this green that's showing for the property line, it's a little bit too overpowering for me. So I'm going to go with something lighter. And this, to me, aesthetically looks quite a bit nicer. So let's go back in and look at some of the other features of this color selector right here, and I'm going to go back to that Pharaoh and Ball color palette to demonstrate this. So if I hover over one of these colors, it's giving me information about that color. It's giving me a color name. Let's get that back up. It's giving me a color name as well as the RGB values, the CMYK values, and the HSV values. So that can be really helpful. If I come down here to the blue section, I've got Chinese blue, I have Belvedere blue, and if I know that a color that I'm looking for in this particular palette has the word blue in it, I can go ahead and just search for blue up here under the search bar, and then I can just X that out in order to undo those results. Then next we have this icon for Show Colors as Grid. We're currently looking at the color grid for the Pharaoh and Ball color palette. To the right of that, we have the Show Colors as List. So if I click on that, it's just going to give me a list view, which shows the name as well as the color. To the right of that, we have a sort feature. And so if I click on that drop-down menu, we can sort by the creation date, the HSV value, which stands for hue, saturation, and value, or we can sort it either ascending or descending by the name. And in this case, it's going to be the number. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that as the HSV value, but just know that you can make changes there. Now let's come back here and look at some other ways to sort of customize these color palettes. So we've already looked at how you can find other available color palettes right there, but you can manage these palettes. And so if I click on that, remember I said I really like the Pharaoh and Ball color palette. Just by clicking this column for active, that means that it's going to show up. So I'll click OK and I'll show you this in the screen. So now when I click on this drop-down menu for the different color palettes, this is going to show up as an option here. So it's basically a quick menu for all of these other palettes that are available to you. Okay, so let's go back into the color selector and then let's see what is available here under the Customs tab. So the Custom tab, it's going to show you a gradient of the rainbow, and you can always come in here and click a specific color that you would like. You can also come over here and you've got sliders here. So remember I told you that the HSV is hue, saturation, and value. I find this to be the easiest way to come up with custom colors. We'll come back to this in a minute. You also have an RGB value right here, and you've got these sliders. So notice right here, you have a little color swatch that's showing the changes that you make as you move the slider around. Then you've got this area like this CMYK color space that you can work in, and you can also work in grayscale. You can use whichever one works best for you. I prefer the HSV. So hue stands for color. When I move the slider, notice right now it's a red color. Then as I move it across, it's changing to a yellow color, a green color, a blue, a magenta, and a red. So that's what the H stands for. So let's go ahead and pick a green hue. And then S is for saturation, so how much pigment is in that color. If I move to the right, it's going to be a very pigmented color. If I move to the left, it's going to be a saturated color. Let's go somewhere around there. And then V has to do with value. So right now, the slider is all the way to the right. And so that means that a lot of white has been added to this color. If I go all the way to the left, black has been added to the color. And so we can do different gradations of what that might look like. So there's how you can use the slider for that. Now, in our example here in our drawing area, I like this shade of green. I wish it were a little bit lighter. And so in order to make a custom color based on this original color, I'm going to use the color picker. So I'm going to click on that. And then when I move my cursor over here into the drawing area, anywhere I click, it's going to move that color over here into our preview, and it's changed the sliders so that I can now make edits based on that. And this color picker is really awesome. You can import different images into your Vectorworks file and use the slider. So if you have a photograph or a painting that you really like the color palette off of, you could use this color selector. Just by importing that file, you can use this color selector to come up with your own color palette. So we picked this green color that we've already used, and what I want to do is I just want to lighten the value of it a little bit. So I'm going to take the V slider and I'm going to move it to the right a little bit, and you can see that that's lighter than that. And then I could always call this Sue's green grass, give it a name so that it's easy to know what color, that's the specific color that you created, and then click apply, and then I'll get that lighter green for my ground plane. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about what colors work well and what colors don't work well. I think that the soft pastel that I have on the screen right now, it works well. What doesn't work well is being too literal with your colors. So if we come back here, so I've got the solid, and then go back into my grid, and let's look at some of those classic Vectorworks colors. If I pick a grass that I think literally is closest to grass, so maybe something like that, and then I come over here and pick, so this is going to be like some pavers, a gray paver. Let's change that to a solid and give it a gray from this. If the gray is that color. And now let's go ahead, if this is a cedar table, we will give this like a brown, a literal brown color. So to me, when I look at this, this is really garish. It's jarring to the eye. That green is really vibrant. There's too much to look at on the screen. So if I come back over here and let's come back over here and go back to the Pharaoh and Ball color palette. So I already said I like that green. Now, even just changing that green makes these other colors that I still think could be toned down a little bit easier to look at. So let's go ahead and see if we can find a better gray. And it doesn't necessarily have to be too much lighter. Let's see. Let's maybe pick that. And that's, to me, a little bit too blue. So let's come over here and see, maybe if I change the saturation a little bit and apply that. And this is more pleasing than that original really garish color that we had. The other thing that we're going to want to be careful about is opacity. So let's come over here, and for opacity, I'm going to move this table over here so that it's half on the pavement and half on the grass, and just show you why the opacity matters. If I move the slider over, So now I'm at 47% opacity. And let's deselect that so that you can see the color a little bit better. You can see that what's underneath that table has changed the color of the table, and it no longer reads as a solid object. So let's say that I think that this is the best color brown for the table, but I got it by using opacity. Well, I can come back over here and let's go ahead and select that again. And then I'm going to click on the color selector again, go back to custom, and use my pick color from screen. So I'm going to pick that brown, and now that gave me the lighter brown. I'm going to go ahead and apply it, and then it went even lighter, and that's because of the opacity. But if I take that back to 100%, I've been able to use that lower opacity color that I like because it's nice and it's soft, and I've been able to get that color using the eyedrop tool in the color selector in order to do that. But I no longer have that issue of being able to see through the table. See, the table's a solid object now. So to sum up, we want to be careful about the colors, make sure that we're not using colors that are too garish, and also be cognizant of how we're using opacity.